This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the great human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. Really happy that you're here today, folks. We've got a really great interview for you. Great friend joins us, Steve Cuss. And let me tell you, what Steve Cuss is carrying and what he's teaching is not just informational. It is truly transformational. So you're going to want to listen to this podcast. You're going to take some notes, and you're going to want to go get his brand new book, The Expectation Gap, the tiny, vast space between our beliefs and experience of God. So Steve is type 3. He's a former pastor, former hospital chaplain, and the founder of Capable Life, a ministry that equips people to notice, name, and lower anxiety in their workspaces, their homes, their churches. He's a spiritual care professional, and he's got 1,600 hours of supervised ministry in CPE, a master's degree focusing on family systems theory and theology. Today is a real gift to have him on the show, and like I said, you're going to want to replay this one. You're going to want to take some notes, and you're going to want to go out and get that book, again, The Expectation Gap. Super happy to have Steve on the show today. And without any further ado, let's get to the show and the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Typology friends, welcome back. We are so stoked to be here today. Anthony is in the studio. How are you, my friend?
I'm recovering. My dad just had a big fall before we started this program. So, but he's back in the car safe on his way home, and I'm here now. So,
wow. You and I took a few deep breaths before you hit record.
We did. We both had some stuff going on.
Well, life keeps lifing, as they say.
We got the perfect guest to help us with our issues right now.
We do. We have the perfect guest to help us with our anxiety of all things. It is our good friend, Steve Cuss, the author of The Expectation Gap, the tiny, vast space between our beliefs and the experience of God. Steve is an Enneagram 3, and he says he's ready to rock on this conversation. Steve, welcome to Typology.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks very much. Anthony, how old's your dad?
91. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And he's on 30 acres. He still rides a four-wheeler. He doesn't get around as good as he used to. So, that kind of thing. I just heard this big bang on my storm door, and I came around and looked, and he was on the ground. So my heart stopped, but thankfully he is okay.
I grew up in Western Australia, and when I was 12, my grandfather, we were on his boat, a boat he had built. We're out in the open ocean, big swell. We're coming back to the mainland with this, and I was pretty terrified. The waves were really big. He's driving the boat. He's whatever age he is, I'm 12. He turns around and he says to me, Steve, if we get washed overboard, don't try to rescue me. This is how I want to go. I'm like, I don't.
That's reassuring.
Wow. And from that day forward, you made anxiety a major study of your life,
Exactly.
Which is, I guess it's all coming together for me.
Now we know where the story began.
But yeah, probably the reason I'm good at what I do is a lot of early experience at it as a kid, for sure.
Steve, if the you now could talk to that 12-year-old, what would you say?
Run!
Every man for himself. It was my grandfather and grandmother. And then, when he got a little bit older, he became a private pilot, and my mum wouldn't let me go up with him because she knew, like, he would much rather die.
He changed his mind. That was the way he wanted to go.
Here's the thing that gets me. Can you imagine if he turned to you when he was in the plane at 15,000 feet and he said, hey, look, if the plane crashes, don't try to save me.
Exactly. If the power
Grandpa,
goes
the
out,
plane crashes.
if the engine stalls.
I'm like, I've got a whole life ahead of me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, too much to believe, man. Too much to believe. Steve, you are an Enneagram 3, the achiever, the performer. And right before we got on, you were talking about an experience you had in, I guess, graduate school, right? And where you were called out on pretense as something that was present in your life. Tell me more about that, because it does tie into the narrative of a 3.
Oh, it really does. I was doing clinical pastoral education, so basically a chaplain residency for people who aren't familiar with that. Medical students do a medical resident. Ministry students can do a chaplain resident at a local teaching hospital. That's what I was doing. And what I didn't realize about it is every morning for 90 minutes, we do functionally group therapy. 6 chaplain residents, 2 supervisors in a circle, 90 minutes a day. Didn't know that was the plan. And within a couple of weeks, they all had my number. I suspect the context of death and suffering really exposes, that it's like a catalyst. So a couple of weeks in, the head supervisor, Peter, says to me in front of the others, he said, "Steve, I've got a nickname for you. It's Super Chaplain." And I thought to myself, yeah, that's about right. That sounds about accurate. And everyone laughed because they could see that I received it as a compliment when really he was teasing me. And everyone laughed. I then got really embarrassed. And he said, it's funny, when I watch you, you seem to be really good at a lot of things. You just seem to be one of those guys that's competent at many things. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, that's right. Tell everyone you've ever met, spread the news. And then he said, man, it must be exhausting how hard you work showing us all the time how good you are. And when he said that, I didn't know I was doing that until he said it. And then I instantly knew, he just summed up 8 years of my life, and he'd seen it within days. And I look around at my peers and they're all nodding everyone sees it, of course. We all have our tells. And I think that is a classic 3 situation. I worked really hard from my late teens to my early 20s to look as impressive as possible. And if I couldn't impress you, that was very threatening to me. And sometimes I'd get pretty aggressive. If I made a joke and you didn't laugh, I'm not proud of this, Ian. I would then make you the butt of my joke to people, things like that. It was pretty bad.
What changed?
Oh, the year of chaplaincy is what changed me. Is every day for 90 minutes. For 12 weeks of that experience, I was combative. And then something clicked in me at the 3-month mark, and I realized these people are trying to help me. They're showing me things about myself that are true that I've been ignoring or didn't know. We'd have to show our family of origin. We'd all put up our genogram. And the guy that ran the chaplains was trained by Murray Bowen, maybe a name familiar to you.
Oh, yeah.
So the head chaplain was one of Bowen's first students when Bowen was first working out his family systems theory. So George had come in and helped run our genograms, our family of origin. And I'm presenting my family of origin and all of the propaganda that comes along with it. I know it's funny when I say being a Cuss, but that's my last name. There's nothing we can do about it. So I would be talking about, how amazing it is to be a Cuss, because that was really our propaganda. We're better than everybody. And the group just gently showed me that my family was pretty significantly dysfunctional. And at first that was a threat, and then it became like a flood of relief. That was a real turning point for me. Oh, thank God I get to be in a dysfunctional family like everybody else. I don't have to hold it together. So the year of chaplaincy really peeled back a lot of that pretense layer. And in many ways, honestly, it was probably the most unconditional love I've ever experienced from non-family members with these other chaplain residents and supervisors, because there was no point in hiding. You're walking into rooms of death and suffering every day. And it's actually something I'm exploring now in my studies. I'm fascinated by this may be jumping around a bit on you, but these Christian leaders that had these big public failures, and then they simply go into denial and hide instead of own it. And so I'm fascinated by how the chaplains took the gain away from me hiding and having pretense. It's like they disarmed me. And that's some of the work I try to do when I'm helping people. I'm always looking to remove the gain of blaming and hiding so that people can just be themselves in front of me. Anyway, I find that to be a fascinating. I'm still studying that and figuring out what are the secrets to that. You know, a lot of therapists are really natural at doing that. But when people come in for my intensives with my wife and I and some of our coaches, that's their feedback is they're like, man, I can just be myself around you, which shouldn't be a compliment. Like that shouldn't be something remarkable, but that's a long-winded version of part of my journey.
Yeah, I would imagine, now hearkening back to something you said before we hit record, you talked about having a reflexive appearance of competence, right? So the self-presentation, and this is normal for threes, right? Very confident, very charismatic. They always look cool, even when they're under pressure. Like, don't worry, I got, here, hold my beer type of thing. Yeah. I got this. But the appearance of competence or of hyper-competence is itself an invisible dynamic that disconnects you from other people, right? Which is funny because the strategy is, I'm going to win love by being competent, a winner, the guy who's the best at everything. And yet the very thing you're doing to try to connect with others disconnects you from them.
Yes, that's exactly right. And even my outlook on life, you know, I was born happy and I was born into a pretty angry family. But I was born happy. I've always been happy. But then there's a side of it where I'm anxiously optimistic. It's like, I have to be happy to be okay. So I really struggle with feeling sad or angry or grieving. I wouldn't worry about it, guys. I'm sure it doesn't get me into trouble at all, but that's often that shadow side, I think, to that three. So, you know, the full palette of emotions, I'm still learning, I think, to experience and appreciate.
Interesting. So I want to revisit that for a second. That's very seven-ish, what you're describing, the enthusiast. So the enthusiast is a very optimistic, very sunny, always finding the silver lining, always they're usually extroverted. They can be quite confident. Under the surface of the skin, though, there's a lot of anxiety, but you would never know it. Never, right? It's well masked. And what motivates the seven is a need to, it's really this need to be happy, to pursue adventures and new escapades and new stuff, and pushing boundaries, always seeing unlimited possibilities, and very, very future-oriented, all in service to avoiding pain and suffering, emotional pain and suffering in the present moment. I'm not saying you're a seven, but I'm just saying that's a lot of seven energy you're talking about. Whereas the three has a need to succeed, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. So which of those sounds more like you?
I know, right? I think three is correct for me. I've got a family member who's a seven, and I would say his wing is seven. He's seven on either side of the seven. He is exactly as you describe. And when he hits trouble, he wants to graduate from it as quick as possible. And when I hear the three wanting to be the best at everything, it's weird, Ian. I'm not particularly competitive certainly in sports. I'm not a good athlete at all. In fact, quite the opposite. A lot of my competence is a coping mechanism for how incompetent I was as a child and teenager. You know, most kids have a part-time job through high school, right? So I worked at McDonald's, the local McDonald's. Well, 2 weeks in, I almost got fired for incompetence. The manager, who's a very nice guy, sat me down and he's like, man, if you can't figure out how to flip burgers and do the fries, you cannot stay. I felt stupid my whole childhood. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel good at something until I was 17. I'd already graduated high school. And I remember my very first job was as a salesman, and I was very successful right out of the gate. And then by the time I was 20, I was one of the nation's top salesmen in my field. And I remember at 17 thinking to myself, oh, this is what my friends felt. This feeling of being good at something, that's what my friends felt like. But for me, it was a very late feeling. So I kind of attribute my three-ishness to like compensating for a gross feeling of incompetence and stupidity. I don't know if that fits the three.
You know what? I'm one of these guys who is very open. You know, to me, the Enneagram is incredibly beautiful, wonderful, helpful, useful, and I hold people's stories lightly. Like, in other words, not meaning I don't take them seriously, meaning, you know, how you arrive at where you are, right? I don't say, oh, there's only one path and there's only one way this could have happened. You know, Sometimes I meet Enneagram teachers and they're very rigid, and I'm like, well, I mean, you know, it's your story. You get to tell it, you know, and the Enneagram can just be a useful tool in helping you understand who you are. I want to read you a quote, and this is a quote that I often will share with threes, and it's from Thomas Merton, who is, you know, my spiritual North Star and has been for 40 years. And this is a very famous passage from New Seeds of Contemplation, and it's chapter 5. And I won't read the whole passage, but I'll just give you a flavor of it. I just want to hear what you think of it. He says, Merton writes this: all sin starts from the assumption that my false self is the fundamental reality of life to which everything else in the universe is ordered. Thus, I use up my life in the desire for pleasure and the thirst for experiences, for power, honor, knowledge, and love, to clothe this false self and construct its nothingness into something objectively real. So Merton is really the one who brought this language of true self and false self into the world.
Yeah.
You were mentioning, like, I just didn't even see that I had this false self, which is what it sounds like you were describing, right? You were clothing yourself in the appearance of competence, and that gave you a sense of being real, of being substantive, of mattering, literally, of having matter, right?
100%. I think if no one's ever said this on typology, I don't know how many episodes you guys have done. I'll be happy to say it. Merton is obviously a jerk. Totally kidding. No, I think you've nailed it. I didn't realize that my hyper confidence that started from 17. I was a chaplain at 24. So it's 3 years of sales, and I moved to America to go to Bible college, and then at 24 from Bible college into chaplaincy. I come into chaplaincy with this extreme thick shell of confidence and skill that death and suffering in the ICUs and ERs stripped away right away. Like my first day on the job, I suddenly realized none of this is helpful when people are dying or grieving. And yet it turns out it's the only skills I have. Like, this is all I know to do is have the answer and be quick-witted and quote the Bible. And I think the gift for me of chaplaincy was discovering that my overconfidence was a wild compensation for my terror of stupidity. And like, I would just flop. If I approached something that I didn't know how to handle, I would just basically flop. You would not recognize me as a kid with how I come across today. So one of my coaches who works for me, Jimmy Carnes, he's a great Enneagram guy. And when we talk about the competitive nature of a 3, Jimmy would say, well, Steve, you choose what to compete in.
Yeah.
And if the reason you're not competitive in board games is you don't think you have a shot at winning, so you just get goofy and make jokes. I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. I mean, typically 3s are competitive, but I would actually say that doesn't mean all 3s are competitive. I'd say that typically all 3s are ambitious. And being ambitious is a little bit different than being competitive, although they have a competitive side. I do think there are tons of 3s I know that are competitive in certain domains. of their life, and other parts of their life, like, I don't care. It's just not something that they're going to care a lot about.
Ambitious for sure. And, I'll see you on Merton and I'll raise you a Keating if we're doing our monks who named Thomas. I love Thomas Keating. He writes about the former alcoholic that came into the monastery to train to be a monk, and how this guy bragged to Keating that he used to be able to drink anyone under the table before he was sober. And then Keating, after watching him for months, approached him in the abbot and said, well, congratulations, you can now fast anyone under the table.
Yeah.
And I really related to, I thought, that sounds like me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're actually describing a story I've told before, but I'm going to tell it again because it's so instructive. Okay. So years ago, I'm in a 12-step program for alcoholics, right? And a guy came in who was a pastor, and he had gotten a big church, big evangelical kind of church, right? He gets a DUI in his hometown. It's in the paper. The church does the very thing you would hope they wouldn't do, which is they fired him instead of trying to help him, right?
Yeah.
But he is publicly humiliated. He is pariah at the grocery store. No one's talking to him. He has the appearance of competency, the appearance of being impressive, the appearance of being the winner is now gone, right? The mask is down, right? And he came into the rooms of recovery. And by the way, he came to a meeting that was like 25 miles from his home. Like there was a million meetings probably within 3 miles of his house, right? But he has to go 3 towns away because he's too humiliated. It's what, as if people don't know, I mean, it's like, whatever. So he comes to the rooms and he's devastated, right? But within about 2 or 3 weeks, all of a sudden, he's become like the go-to guy in this room for what it means he is now the star alcoholic in the room. Nobody is a better recovering alcoholic than this guy. And he's quoting the big book and he's giving advice, and people are like, wow, this guy's amazing. And I'm like, he's been sober for 20 minutes. It's like, what? And so his sponsor, who was a really smart guy, and he was like, I think he was like a mechanic. So it's not like he was a PhD, just he had a PhD in life.
Yeah.
And he said to this guy, he said, so-and-so, you may not talk in meetings for the next 6 months. All you can do is listen. You have to sit and listen. You may not talk. And that's not an uncommon piece of wisdom for some guys in the program that like, you just got to listen for 6 months before you can share. And what it did is this guy had now created a new mask of I'm no longer the best pastor in town, but now I'm the best alcoholic. And, amazing, right?
I mean, Ian, you and I both have a background as local church pastors, and some of my consulting is to come in after the board has forced the pastor into a sabbatical that he didn't want.
Right.
And he's nothing huge, but he's gotten aggressive with the staff. He's breaking all the rules where he's blowing everything up on a Thursday and making them work overtime for the Sunday and just stuff like that. And then I'm always looking for, and I wish this wasn't as common, how many of those pastors on sabbatical start filming video series on how to rest? It's the same thing.
This is, oh my gosh, classic. You're right. It is. It's classic. Or this same guy was talking about writing a book about how I had this big fall from grace, but now I'm the winner who turned it all around and became deep. I mean, Anthony and I'm going to tell you, we've done 350 shows. Anthony, how many times have we had threes on the show and we've been like, oh boy.
It's come up many times. And it's interesting because even the titles of their books, you talk about that, Ian. And we've had some that are a little more self-aware. Think about Alan Jackson's daughter, who said when she had a husband who passed away, and she was grieving and she was riding through her grief. She's a 3, but she had to be very, conscious of the fact of not for lack of a better word, sort of capitalizing on the situation she was in. So she purposefully, pressed pause as she was grieving, knowing she really did want to write a book about it, but wanted to do it in a way that honored her and her husband.
Yeah. So these patterns of each type, right, are so reflexive and so unconscious. It's like Johari's window, right? It's that one square where it's stuff about you that you don't know and nobody else knows, or it's stuff that you don't know, but everybody else does know, right? That you are full of crap, and you're spinning a new tale of your greatness, right?
Yeah.
And you've actually done a lot of work with people around predictable patterns. I mean, how do you help people see patterns and cut them off at the pass? Like, how would you have helped that guy in my meeting to realize, do you see what you're doing, bro?
Yeah. I think the beauty of predictable patterns is once you see them, you can't ever unsee them. The same coach who works with me, Jimmy, who's our local Enneagram guru, he says predictable patterns are like going through the haunted house the second time. The first time through, the guy with the chainsaw jumps out, you freak out. If you were to go and get right back in line, get another ticket, come right back in, you know where the chainsaw guy is. So we try to tell people a couple of things. It's easier to notice predictable patterns in other people than yourself, but you're always looking for, where do I keep running into myself again and again and again? And then the next question is, what am I doing that is costing me and or my people more than we want to pay? So for someone like this guy, he's probably quite happy to pay the price to be impressive, but his people, whether it's his family or his staff, are like, dude, figure it out. So that's usually the question. Sometimes, I'll be doing like a 4-day workshop with the staff, and the primary leader is not in the room. And the staff are like, can you help us get him in here? Like, he's the one that most needs this stuff because he's generating the anxiety. They're carrying it. In a classic predictable pattern, this is a generalization. The minority of the people generate the anxiety. The majority of them carry it. If you're generating it and you're not carrying it, you don't feel it, so you can't change. And then the carriers are all making micro adjustments, these little adjustments to keep everything kind of stable. It's most easy to see in these infamous public Christian scandals, these big name Christian leaders that have had a big fall, kind of like the guy you're talking about. If you were to go back to his staff, you would see probably for years, they're saying, well, that's just him. No one's perfect. He's carrying a lot. In some church traditions, he's the anointed one, this kind of stuff. These are all micro adjustments. And then we do it in family as well. I was raised in a family of origin with one extremely angry parent, and we all took that person's temperature when they walked in the door, and we all adjusted ourselves to keep that person stable. It's a lot of the reason I'm good at what I do now. So I really enjoy with predictable patterns because you're just trying to notice when you get stuck. And the signs of being stuck, and Ian, I know you're a nerd on this stuff. This is cybernetics or brief therapy, the Mental Research Institute guys. They were geniuses at this. They're always looking for when you're applying more of the same or try harder to something that's not working. So and I had my son's permission to share this, when one of my sons came home from high school basketball practice, might have been middle school, but he was in school and he was really frustrated. He's like, Dad, William's a ball hog. William never passes the ball. And I'd say, well, what do you do about it? Which is my way of asking, what's your attempted solution that isn't working? And he says, well, as long as William's not passing the ball to me, I'm not passing the ball to William. And in that moment, my son's using more of the same and try harder and doesn't realize he has become the problem. I was very sensitive when I was a pastor. I get my feelings hurt easily. I'm a pretty gentle soul. And I had a handful of bullies, not just people that had an opinion, but just people that like to kick me around. And I get so fixated on them, and I go home to my wife and complain about them. And when I was really unhealthy, I'd like I'd leak to my staff about them. Like, let's all agree that this person's a jerk, this kind of stuff. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, what am I doing? Where am I stuck in a predictable pattern? Well, I keep meeting with them to explain myself. Well, who's more to blame here? The person generating the anxiety or the one carrying it and making the micro adjustments? So I remember sitting down with one of my bullies one day. I had an elder with me. I had one of my board members, and he lays out his litany of issues, and they were all unreasonable. And he actually said, what do you have to say for yourself? Like I'm a little boy, And I just very calmly said, nothing. I'm done explaining myself to you. You've lost the right to my insight. Last time when we met, I actually gave you my vulnerability, and I told you how much it hurts when you do this. And you haven't stopped, and you're still slandering me to other people in the church. I hear about that. So I'm done. I'm here to listen to you, but I'm not giving you any more of my opinion. Because the more I gave him my insight, the more ammunition I was giving him to hit, to beat me with. But what the problem with humans is we're always fixated on the other person. We disconnect from ourselves. And so often, this is why I love systems theory, so often I'm part of the problem, even with somebody who's a really bad actor. And that gives me great agency to make a change. So
Yeah. We do this in 12-step work, right? It's part of the genius of 12-step work, which is in your 5th step or your 4th step, you have to take a fearless and moral inventory, right? And it's got to be rigorous.
Yeah.
And as part of it, you're going to write down all the resentments you have toward other people or institutions or ideas. Any resentments you have, they all got to go down on the page. So it could be, Sister Mary Ignatius in the 2nd grade who took away your, recess time, or it could be your
Merton.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing with the resentment thing is the very 4th column as you go through the resentment process is what was my part?
Yeah.
Where am I in this equation? Where did I fail in this relationship? And in many instances, the failure might be very, very small. You may have actually been the victim, someone who was really victimized.
Yeah.
But it's really important to find even a microcosm of your own contribution to the problem so that you can have agency to do something about it.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're a therapist listening, you already know this truth. Your work doesn't end when the session ends. After the client logs off or walks out the door, there's still scheduling, notes, billing, insurance follow-ups, all the invisible labor that nobody claps for, but absolutely has to get done. That's why I want to tell you about Simple Practice. Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR built specifically for therapists. It's HIPAA compliant, high trust certified, and it brings scheduling, billing, insurance, and client communication all into one place. So you're not duct taping 5 systems together and hoping for the best. Automated appointment reminders help cut down on no-shows. Note templates speed up documentation, and suddenly the business side of your practice feels, well, lighter. They even offer credentialing services if you're just starting out or growing your practice, which, let's be honest, can feel like a part-time job you never applied for. So, if you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now is a great time to try Simple Practice. Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
Yeah, I used to pastor in Las Vegas, and I did a lot of work with domestic violence. And we were really careful with our language. When a woman would come in looking to get free,
Oh, yeah.
She is genuinely a victim of a perpetrator who's perpetrating physical violence. It's horrific that police should be involved. And so we didn't say you are responsible, but we would gently say, in what ways are you complicit? And that would help her realize, if I'm complicit, then I have the power and agency to leave. Because, obviously, as you guys know, abusers try to take your agency from you. And we were trying to
Yes.
gently give it back by saying, you can take responsibility. I'm chasing down Genesis 3 right now. Just this is a real simple idea that I'm quite captivated by. You know, Adam and Eve obviously are blaming each other in the Garden of Eden and blaming the serpent. And however you interpret Genesis 3 as metaphorical or literal, I'm not interested in that. But I'm fascinated that I think the modern equivalent of blaming isn't just saying he did it. It's anytime my brain is in your brain. So I may not be blaming you. I may be really worried about you, but I'm still fixated on you. And I'm trying to worry my way to change you. I think that is the human condition, is when we get anxious, when we get reactive, we disconnect and we fixate on someone else rather than paying attention to ourselves. A lot of the work I do is with caregivers, faith leaders, and you know, they are usually the worst at taking care of themselves. They actually think it's selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the lesson I learned in chaplaincy, is the only thing I have to offer in the room is a well self. I have nothing else to offer than my presence, God's presence. And that's hard work to be well, especially, I mean, the year as a chaplain, a couple of hundred people, I would have attended to a couple of hundred deaths. Chaplaincy is just especially in a level 1 trauma hospital, it's just an onslaught of nonstop death and suffering. It's crazy.
What's, when you were in that experience, or, you know, even for anyone that's in a pastor in ministry, what's like one sort of belief that you had that would make you successful in ministry that you had to let die to become a healthier human being?
I think the problem with pastoral training is we don't give people room to be human-sized. It's almost like you graduate from theological education and you think you're a different species. And so if you're not human-sized, then that means you're not allowed to admit when you're sad, grieving, hurting, overwhelmed, beyond your capacity. The gift of chaplaincy, and this began in the 1920s with Anton Boysen, the founder of modern hospital chaplaincy, who himself was a schizophrenic who spent years of his life in psych wards. And when he was in a psych lockdown as a patient, he still saw himself as a chaplain. So he was always chaplain and patient. And there's something crazy about that. There's something that could be an easy joke, which I'm happy to make that, like, oh, a schizophrenic that thinks he's, you know, serving the Lord. That sounds right. But actually there's something really beautiful about it.
Yeah, very beautiful.
Build that into us, that you're never anything other than a human being. But my brain, Anthony, it still tells me that I have to make you feel better. If you, even on this pod, if you were to tell me, let's say you talked about your dad in a way that you were visibly overwhelmed, my brain starts telling me, oh, give Anthony a way to do this. What? Like, we don't know each other. Like, who am I? But that's how unreliable my reactivity is. And I think people in ministry, we don't realize, you know, we blame 100% of our vocation on the calling of God. And I think it would really free us to have less percent on God's call and some percent of our call on dysfunction. And that took me a while to realize, to say, oh, I think I am in ministry because God called me. I think that's true, but I'm also in ministry to work out some childhood wounds. I like standing on a stage. It's nice to monologue 30 minutes a week and people, that feels good, you know, some of that stuff. So I think there, you know, so many people in ministry feel an unhealthy pressure to perform. And the expectation gap, my book, it's written for everybody, but it is for the pastor that doesn't know how to admit that their experience of God is significantly different from what they proclaim. Yeah.
I remember it was like maybe 2000 and I can't remember what the time frame was, maybe 2010. I had this revelation that my congregation had become my family of origin and that I was still trying to work out these unresolved dramas through my relationship with them. And, to your thing, that's a little bit, we could have done some family systems theory work around that. But it was this realization of like, oh my gosh, which then put me in a situation where I was perpetually anxious.
Yeah.
Perpetually anxious. And I was either higher than a kite on Sunday or at some point or absolutely decimated.
Yeah.
Because if I couldn't make you better, then I couldn't quantify my value.
Yeah.
And if I can't quantify my value, then I feel really anxious that, I'm not doing a good job, or I'm not, and so ministry's hard that way.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the core concepts of systems theory is differentiation of self. And I don't really care for the way it's originally taught by Bowen and Ed Friedman and some of those. I really like to merge it with attachment theory, because I think all of this is about connection. I think the end goal is connection to myself, connection to you guys, connection to God's presence. I think that's it. And I think sometimes differentiation can sound a bit detached, like, so long as I'm well, who cares about you?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, when I was a pastor, I always struggled with the difference between me and the church. You would criticize the church and I would feel it in my nervous system.
Yeah.
And that was always hard to turn that off. Yeah.
Have you always felt at some point that if something goes wrong in a relationship, it must be your fault?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm dealing with this in real time. I'm always looking for patterns in my own life that cost me or my people. And sometimes asking people, am I doing something that's costing you? But several years ago, I realized, I'll run into someone, haven't seen him in a while, maybe on the street. We'll have a little catch up there on the sidewalk. And then they will say, we really should grab coffee sometime. And my brain will say, you need to hunt them down like a dog until we do. Now, they don't really want to grab coffee. They just don't know how to say goodbye. But I would suddenly obligate myself. And then I started to notice, oh, wow, every time I'm done with a conversation, I put myself under obligation to that person. Like I'll wrap up the conversation by making some kind of promise to them. It's super weird. So, yeah.
Do you feel like at times, I'm asking you this because these are things that I wrestle with, right? Do you ever wrestle with this feeling that, I had this realization the other day. I realized that whenever I walk into a room, my default belief is that I'm being graded, that I'm being judged, not judged like I'm being evaluated and graded. Will I be acceptable or not acceptable to this person or to this group, right? And then everything becomes about how do I get an A? Now, It's very three-ish in some ways.
Yeah.
But I got a strong 3-wing, and I'm a self-pres 4, so there's a lot of 3 stuff going on, 3-ish stuff going on. Yeah. That's probably, have you ever had that feeling?
Yeah, I did. I do feel like in some ways my BCAD life is pre-chaplaincy, post-chaplaincy. I think you put a pretentious performer in enough rooms of death and suffering, and the only way to survive is to become an integrated human. But I am noticing a fresh dose of this in real time. I spend most of my time, I'll be getting on a plane again tomorrow and going and introducing the science of reactivity, contagious reactivity, to a room of people that have never heard about it. And I'm very good at introducing you to yourself in a way that you've never heard this concept, but you can see it in your life. So I get really, really high feedback when I speak. I'm a good storyteller. I use humor because when you're talking about anxiety, humor is a big piece. I've studied stand-up comedy, all of that. So I put quite a good package together. And what I'm noticing in my 3-ness is anything less than raving fans at the end is utter failure.
Yeah.
I feel like saying I should give you a discount on whatever I charge. So I was just recently with a group where they had me come in for a day and a half. Sometimes I'll do these long workshops. They had me come in February and March to do a day and a half with them. That's, 8 to 9 hours of material. Then they had me come back last week to do 3 45-minute talks. And I was really anxious about it. And it's because, have I told this story before? Because a rerun for me is Armageddon. I blew them, like they told me it was a church camp and they're wonderful people. And they said, we've never had anyone like you before. This was unbelievable. Even the maintenance crew, even the grounds crew loved it. And they're trying to tell me these guys are jaded. They don't care about emotional health. And so what that says to my brain is, oh boy, you're going to let them down. And I have to manage my own performance anxiety and just say, no, Steve, you're a human being used by God. It's okay to tell a story again. It's okay to make a second impression. Even the book, that we're sort of talking about, The Expectation Gap, that's my second book. I'm really proud of the concepts in that book, but I'm not proud of the way I wrote it.
Really? Why?
My first book, Managing Leadership Anxiety, had such a strong narrative core. And even Ian, like I view you as like a phenomenal writer. I remember reading Chasing Francis when I was a pastor, and just your writing is, the fix. You're just such a gifted writer. I'm still learning to write. I think I'm a good speaker. I've had a lot of experience speaking, but I think my second book was very much a sophomore effort, and it doesn't have that narrative drive. It's very heavy on concepts, and the concepts are life-changing. If you try them, I really think it'll change your life. But I wish I had another 3 months to wrap it around a narrative core. My mum died while I was writing that book. I was flying home to Western Australia several times to take care of my mum. I wasn't at my best. So yeah, I wrestle. That would be that. To me, everything I'm saying now is that unhealthy side of the three.
Yeah. It's funny. Thank you for your kind words. But, the thing about books is, I was on an interview yesterday and someone asked me about, they actually was a group of people wanting to talk. There was a book group that a friend of mine leads. And they had gone through Jesus, My Father, the CIA, and Me, this memoir that I wrote.
I remember it.
They had a bunch of questions about it. And they said, well, do you have a favorite book? And I'm like, no, I said, I have, books are like kids. You love them all, but differently. Like you connect to each of them differently, and the love manifests differently. I have, do I have a favorite child? Well, I don't know. Ask me on what day it is, but books, I've never finished a book and felt like it was everything I wanted it to be. And if it's any encouragement to you, I can't remember if it was someone like William Faulkner, right? So a giant author or it could have been Hemingway. They were still editing books that had won Nobel Prizes. Like we're still in the manuscript 30 years after the book had released, still fiddling with it.
It is to let it go. It is a vulnerable.
Oh man. So vulnerable.
I was listening to an up-and-coming stand-up comedian, and he was opening up on this interview about how you get good. He's now full-time, and he's only been full-time a couple of years. And he said, musicians, they get to practice in the garage, and then the first time the public experience their work is the finished album. He said, comedians, you do it 200 times to the public before you put out your special. And I thought, yep, that's me with my speaking. Even tomorrow, I'll get on this plane, I'll go speak to these people. I'm going to put something in there that is newer. And it's probably like this pretense Genesis 3 thing I'm working at right now. That's how I get good at speaking. But writing, man, it's on the page, and the publisher has it, and it's locked. And
Speaking of comedy and having to win the room, Ian, tell that story about Larry David at the Yankee Stadium. Do you remember that?
No, remind me.
He was at the stadium. The camera came on him on the screen, and the whole stadium like erupted, and they were all cheering. He stood up and he waved, and when he was leaving, one guy said, "Larry David, you suck." And that's all he could think about. He dismissed the whole thing before. All he could think about was that one guy that said, "You suck."
Yeah, that's because in Larry David's mind, that was his father.
Yes, that's right. It's his mother, right? Larry David, famously, his mother's aspiration for him was to become a mailman, which was after he graduated college.
Yeah. Oh, low expectations from mom, huh?
Oh my goodness.
Steve, false self, true self. These are funny terms, right? And they, I'm not sure anybody can really. You have a much easier time in life describing your false self. That's my experience, right? People have a much harder time articulating what a true self is, probably because it's not a static object. It's a process. It's a process. Yeah. So it's hard to describe something that's in process. Yeah. But I am curious to know, like, do you feel, let me put it this way, do you feel like you're the best version of yourself you've ever been right now? Or are there things going on in your psyche and in your heart and your soul that you're looking at going, man, I gotta really work on this? What's like, and if so, what is that?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually trying to define tangibly what the true self looks like, because it is, I think one of my skills is trying to put practical measurement or flesh on conceptual things. So to directly answer your question, I think I am the best version of myself I've ever been. I think I'm the most relaxed. But I also, I'm terrible at trusting God. I'm a person of faith. I did not grow up with any faith, and Jesus changed my life. My first encounter with unconditional love was in the church as a teenager. And I couldn't say it this way at the time, but I'd say my soul relaxed. I walked into a church and I didn't have to protect myself, and I was accepted as I was, and it was palpable for me. And you would think someone with my life experience and what has happened to me and what the opportunities, that I would have more faith than I have. So I think that's the part of me I'm still. So right now, I moved from a regular income as a local church pastor. It was never a big income, but it was a reliable income, and it was all I'd ever known for 30 years. And now I work for myself. I'm a entrepreneur and trying to figure out how to charge a speaking fee when my heart and soul is under-resourced people. And I struggle to trust God will provide enough speaking engagements, even though he has reliably since 2020. And the doors that have opened have been mind-blowing. So it's like my life is, God does amazing things. I worship God and then I doubt. That's my predictable pattern. So I don't know if I'll ever get over that, Ian. It's complicated for me because I don't believe God owes me a speaking calendar. My theology does not depend on God taking care of me. So that's where it gets, is it doubt or is it wisdom? I don't believe God owes me health, but I need my health for my income. So it's all confusing. I overthink things. So on that side, I think I've still got a lot of growing to do. But I think most people who experience me don't experience me as that achieving three. I think they do experience me as a kind presence where they can be themselves. And then I've had people, when our church, we moved into a building after being portable for years, and we grew like crazy. And some of my older staff experienced me going from relaxed to anxious as our church grew rapidly. That's several years ago now. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does. I just always like to ask people, it seems to me that the answer you gave was great, because actually you've used a word three or four times in our conversation that's really interesting. It's the word relaxed.
Yeah.
We had a person on the show recently, and they were relaying a story about Dallas Willard. I think it was on the show or somewhere else that I was. And they asked Dallas, somebody asked Dallas in an interview, what do you think Jesus was like? And he goes, relaxed.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a brilliant answer. He was relaxed. And if you think about it, throughout the gospel, Jesus is relaxed.
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying there's a kind of intensity to Jesus at different times in the gospel, for sure. But you never get the sense that he's anxious.
Right.
Anxious would not be a word that you would apply to Jesus. And I think actually a sign of mental health is a kind of relaxedness about who one is. And when you relax, you just kind of, like you were saying, it's okay. I'm in the middle of the boat. I don't need to be in the bow. I don't need to be in the stern. I can just be in the middle of the boat with everybody else. I don't have to drive the bus. I can just be another guy on the bus. I'm just relaxed. I've got nothing to prove. I'm not, I'm just who I am, and a work in progress. And I think that's part of the reason older people sometimes are attractive.
Yeah, that's right.
Because if they've done their work, right, they're just relaxed.
Yeah, I think so. I think, my field is contagious reactivity, noticing how it comes up from within us, like my need to make people feel better or people please, and then noticing when it's coming at us from others, like on social media, where you see comments just devolving so quickly. And then you start to see all of the anxiety flying around Jesus at him, all of the expectations people put on him, and his capacity to not catch it and spread it was pretty stunning. When he did spread anxiety, it was totally deliberative. When he would, poke the Pharisees or something, that was like a deliberative move. It wasn't a reactive move. My theology that I'd like to throw this by you guys and see how this strikes you. I used to think the true self was getting back to who God made me to be before my coping mechanism showed up. I now think my true self is a combination of who God made me to be and my redeemed coping mechanisms. So to me, the problem with a lot of people of faith, including me, I think we have our faith and our coping mechanisms, which are two separate things. And we don't even realize we make them one syncretized thing. So for example, one of the ways I get love as a 3 is being there for you when you're in need. I am good at being there for others. If you look at the history of my ministry, lots of crisis intervention in my history. I like to help out. Well, that's a coping mechanism. That's how I survived childhood. And also it sounds a lot like the gospel, to love your neighbor. And so I can't tell the difference in my brain. When is my coping mechanism making me rush in and when's God telling me to do something? Same with my people pleasing. Like if I can make you happy with me, my soul can relax. But also Paul said, be all things to all people. So I get very muddled. And to me, my journey of maturity is who God made me to be and the areas of my life that I'm depending on that I've asked God to redeem. And that to me is my lifelong journey into becoming more and more of my true self.
I want to end there. That was rich right there, boy. That was worth the price of admission. Steve Cuss, wow. Author of the new book, The Expectation Gap, or his latest book, The Expectation Gap, The Tiny Vast Space Between Our Beliefs and Experience of God. Name of the first book again?
Managing Leadership Anxiety, Yours and Theirs.
Right.
They both deal with dynamics that disconnect, and the first one deals with our human relationships, and the second one deals with our faith, the dynamics that disconnect us from God's awareness of God.
I love it. Steve, we got to get you back on the show. Tell folks your website and all the stuff they should know to learn more about you.
Yeah, they can go to stevecusswords.com. With a name like
You had to. You just had to.
You have to do it. And then I run a podcast with Christianity Today. Ian's been a guest on there. It was a fantastic conversation when Ian came on. You can get my books. I've got all kinds of free and paid resources through that site.
Wonderful. Well, Anthony, I'm glad your dad is okay.
Thank you. I'm still coming down, but this conversation has helped.
Is your nervous system a little more regulated after this?
Yeah.
Good. We can do some box breathing when we sign off. Okay?
Yeah, totally.
Just the two of us.
That's right.
Just the two of us. Again, Steve, thanks for being with us. And for all of you listening, we want to thank you for being part of our family. And may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, may you have rest. Until next time.